Next, we are moving on to the next hematopoietic vitamin, that is cobalamin. So, cobalamin has five, can you see it is like a pyrrole ring. So, in the center of the pyrrole ring, what we can see is cobalt. So, that is why it is called cobalamin. The percentage of cobalt present is 4.35 percentage. Okay. So about the B12, we should understand that B12, we are, what are the primary sources of B12? It is primarily animal food. Animal food on the, it's like just on the contrary to the folic acid, that is the plant origin, but this is animal origin. Okay. Now we are going to see the absorption and transport of vitamin B12. So we are going to see the absorption of vitamin B12. So when we are taking it through the diet, it is found in a protein bound form. Now through the diet, it reaches the mouth. So in the mouth, you can see the protein bound cobalamin is reaching the stomach. Now you can see that from the mouth, something else is produced. That is called as cobalophyllin, otherwise called as R binders or haptocorins. So just learn one name here, that is cobalophyllin. The others are optional if you can remember, otherwise also fine. Okay. So from the salivary glands, there is one protein that is synthesized, which is called as the cobalaphylins. Now this cobalaphylin is also reaching the stomach. Now in the stomach, there is a protein digesting enzyme, which is the protein digesting enzyme in the stomach, that is the pepsin. So gastric parietal cell secretes the pepsin, which digests the protein which is surrounding the cobalamin. So once the proteins are digested, the cobalamin is like off guarded. So it has to combine with another protein. So we have already one protein in our hand which came from the mouth. So that is cobalophyllin. So this cobalamin come and binds to this cobalophyllin. So that again we got a protein bound form, which is like a cobalophyllin bound vitamin B12 or cobalamin. Now it is again going, but from the gastric cells, like the gastric parietal cell itself, one more protein is synthesized, and that is called the very important protein, and that is the intrinsic factor. So this intrinsic factor is synthesized from the stomach, but it is not bound with the cobalamin from in the stomach. It is in another organ. So you can see that the intrinsic factor is also going to the next organ system. So it reaches the duodenum. Once the cobalophyllin bound cobalamin has reached the duodenum, and also we can see the intrinsic factor is also inside the duodenum. Now we can see that in the duodenum, something else is opening, that is the pancreatic enzymes are being secreted to the duodenum. So this pancreatic enzymes will digest the cobalophyllin which is surrounding the cobalamin. So you can see the pancreatic enzyme is digesting that. Once again the cobalamin is off guarded. Now we have another thing to accept this cobalamin, and that is the intrinsic factor. So this intrinsic factor will take up this cobalamin so that it becomes now bound with intrinsic factor. So this intrinsic factor bound cobalamin is going to the next organ system, that is from the jejunum it reaches the ileum. Now it is ready for absorption. So the site of absorption, major site of absorption of cobalamin or B12, it is ileum. Now the ileum, it is binding to a receptor which is called intrinsic factor receptor, because the cobalamin is bound to the intrinsic factor. So there is a receptor for intrinsic factor, and this receptor is called as cubilin. Now this cubilin bound or intrinsic factor receptor bound, intrinsic factor bound cobalamin. So multiple things are there. So we have a receptor there which is cubilin, and we have a intrinsic factor bound B12. That is it. Now this is taken into the portal vein. So when it is taken into the portal vein, it again needs a transporter. So the transporter is transcobalamin. There are two transcobalamins, 1 and 2, but the major transporter is transcobalamin 2. Now with the help of this transcobalamin 2, it reaches the target organ. So you can see it reaches the target organ. There in the target organ, there is a receptor for this transcobalamin, and that is called as megalin, or you can just remember the transcobalamin receptor. So this transcobalamin receptor or megalin will take up this B12 bound intrinsic factor into it, so that now it is inside the target organs. So this is how the vitamin B12 or cobalamin is absorbed from the intestine with the help of multiple proteins. So from the stomach onwards, all the mechanism to transport this cobalamin in the intestine and into the portal vein, everything is like happening from the mouth itself. So from mouth, cobalophyllin then comes from the stomach. It is like the intrinsic factor. Then the intrinsic factor bound cobalamin is now accepted with the help of intrinsic factor receptor, and then it is transported with the help of transcobalamin too. So that is how it is reaching the target organ. So this is the very complicated mechanism of B12 absorption. So we have seen how the cobalamin is absorbed and it is transported for various uses in our body. Now we are going to see the active form of B12. The B12 has actually two active forms. This is a very, very important question. The active form of B12 and the coenzyme role. So the coenzyme role and the active form of B12. There are two active forms. One is ADO-B12. ADO-B12 is otherwise called as adenosyl B12. The second is methyl B12. So that is what we write as methyl B12 and ADO-B12. So these are the two active forms. Okay. Now where is it used? There are only two enzymes in human body which can use this B12. So the number one is the adenosyl B12. Adenosyl B12 is required for the conversion of L-methyl malonyl coenzyme A to succinyl coenzyme A. Tell me the name of the enzyme if you remember. It is methyl malonyl coenzyme A mutase. Fine. The next reaction is methyl B12. That is for the conversion of homocysteine to methionine, which I have already discussed. So we know that the methyl tetrahydrofolic acid, methyl THFA, is converted to THFA, which in turn gives the B12 methyl group to B12, so that this is becoming methyl B12. So this methyl B12 is acting as a coenzyme for the conversion of homocysteine to methionine. This reaction already we have seen. And what is the name of this enzyme? The name of this enzyme is, yes, it is homocysteine methyl transferase, otherwise called as methionine synthase. Two names are there. You should be knowing both the name. So for this, we know that both B9 and B12 is required. Okay. So this reaction where homocysteine accumulate both in B9 deficiency as well as in B12 deficiency. So what about methyl malonic acid accumulation? This is exclusively by B12. So if there is a B12 deficiency, methyl malonic acid accumulate, then homocysteine level also accumulate. To differentiate between B9 and B12, what we can use? We can use serum methyl malonic acid, because only B12 is required for the conversion of methyl malonyl coenzyme A to succinyl coenzyme A. That is a very, very important differentiating feature, or a biochemical differentiating feature for B12 as well as B9 deficiency. Okay. So what is its importance? I'll tell you later. So these are the two enzymes. Plus, if I'm adding one more enzyme, it is not present in humans, but I'm just adding, it is leucine amino mutase. Leucine aminomutase. It is a third enzyme which is requiring B12, but this is not seen in humans. So in humans, only these two are important. So what are the sources of B12? The sources of B12, primarily it is food of animal origin. That is the most important one. So who can develop a B12 deficiency? Strict vegans can develop B12 deficiency. So how or what food in a strict vegan can supplement this B12 deficiency? That is curd. So if they are like including curd in their diet, this can supplement the B12 deficiency. It's because the lactobacillus, which or the microflora that is added to you by using these curd, they can synthesize B12. So that is how the strict vegans can supplement for the B12 deficiency. Okay, now what are the causes of B12 deficiency? The most important one is the nutritional causes. So that is what I said, strict vegans. Then coming to the gastric causes, we know that intrinsic factor of calcium is required for the absorption of B12. So if there is an intrinsic factor deficiency, so what is the cause of intrinsic factor deficiency? Autoimmune gastritis, like pernicious anemia, where we can see there is a intrinsic factor deficiency. Then another cause is gastrectomy, because we know parietal cells of the stomach is required for the synthesis of intrinsic factor. So that is a gastric causes. Then coming to the intestinal causes, intestinal causes is mostly, the absorption of B12 is taking place in the ileum. So anything which affects the ileum, like the Crohn's disease. Then another one is stagnant loop syndrome. Then a fish tapeworm, which is Diphyllobothrium. So the fish tapeworm, life Diphyllobothrium latum, if they are if they are these parasites, if they are infecting us, then also there is deficiency of B12, because it is going to, this B12 is always a favorite food of this fish tapeworm. So fish tapeworm will eat away all the B12, so there won't be any B12 for us, for our body. So that is how fish tapeworm is causing the B12 deficiency. So these are some of the causes of vitamin B12 deficiency.